Well, you're going to be really delighted Tyler LeBaron, who is a good friend and really amazing scientist and chemist who understands the scientific method really well, discussed two really important topics. One is he is working with me to solve the plastic pollution problem. We go into depth about that and what our initial project is going to consist of. And then we dive into a somewhat obscure topic, but I think nevertheless really important for biology. It's heavily not heavily, but certainly mentioned in my book, so Your Guide to Cellular Health, that's coming out very soon in the fall. Is the concept of reductive stress, where you have a surplus of electrons, and some of the things that you can do. And I was really glad we had this conversation because he reminded me of something that I tend to forget, and that is the value of molecular hydrogen. And there's no one better that I know personally, or even in the world, that is probably better at explaining the value and has helped to contribute to the wealth of knowledge in the literature and the science that exists to support this is a really valuable therapeutic intervention. So I think you're really going to like it and enjoy it and benefit from it. So I hope you enjoy it as much as I did.
We're all getting older, and as you get older, you just have more senescence. You have these pathological cells that just produce a little more free radicals than they normally would otherwise, and more inflammation than would otherwise. Taking hydrogen gas helps to reduce and modulate that, and helps to activate things like autophagy, and as well as helps to prevent excessive autophagy. So it modulates this entire process that happens as we age. So I think we're all susceptible to aging, unfortunately, and hydrogen is going to help with that. And then the other issue living in this world is we are always exposed to some sorts of toxins, whether it's the plastics that we get our foods in, we go outside and it's just smoky. We have wildfires around here. We have pollution from the cars. And we have seen a lot of studies showing that we administer hydrogen gas simultaneously or before the administration of some of these environmental pollutants and toxins, that hydrogen gas prevents or helps to mitigate against some of these toxic effects.
Welcome, everyone. Dr. Mercola helping you take control of your health. And today we're in for a treat with Tyler LeBaron, who's a personal friend of mine, has been on this podcast many times, and he has a variety of talents to his credit. He's now a Ph.D. When we first connected, he wasn't, but he has a Ph.D. in molecular hydrogen or some derivative of that. I think do you have the only Ph.D. in molecular hydrogen in the world?
Well, technically, it's in physiology. My dissertation was on cardiovascular and cerebrovascular diseases, but we used molecular hydrogen as one of the therapeutic modalities we were looking at.
Okay. Well, good. Thank you for that clarification. And in addition to his scientific expertise, he is a profoundly fit individual. And one of his new passions, in addition to running a marathon, what was your latest time? Was it under 2:30?
Well, back in 2011, but I was hoping to compete and do like a low 2:20.
Yeah.
So that's probably where I'm at.
Which is insane, folks. I mean, the 2:20 used to win. That used to win Boston Marathon all the time, and now they've broken 2 hours, which is just insane. It's just pushing it beyond human limits, I think. Or if they haven't broken it, they're very close. The guy that was going to do it actually was killed in an auto accident, which is tragic. But anyway, he does that, and he's deadlifted 450 pounds, 500 pounds. So it's an unusual combination of physical strength. And in addition to that, he's like a world-class arm wrestler and taught me how to do it. And you may have seen that video. But he also taught the person I defeated in that arm wrestling contest. We both had the same instructions from Tyler. He shared with us the principles. And there's a lot of things you need to know to be effective, but you still need strength. I mean, pretty much most everyone competing in this sport understands those principles, but then it boils down to strength and a lot of muscle strength in the forearm and the fingers, things that most people would never think about training. So this is why someone like Tyler can come in who's super fit. His mitochondria are producing energy at a very high rate because he is an optimized human. He really knows how to generate mitochondrial energy, and he transforms that out to defeat people who are beasts, that outweigh him by 100 pounds, and he just arm wrestles them just like he looks the other way, and it's like brushing his teeth or something. He just pins them down before they even can say anything. So it's really amazing to watch, and we're going to talk about a lot of exciting things today. But with all that introduction, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, well, thank you, Dr. Mercola. It's always a pleasure to just come and have a conversation and dialogue about some of the science and what's going on and how do we optimize our health and well-being and longevity and just have a fun discussion.
Yeah, for sure. So I think you're competing in an arm wrestling contest this weekend, right?
Yeah, actually, I am. Yeah, there's one coming up. It's a World Series of arm wrestling competition, and so I'm planning to make a 3 or 4 hour drive and do a little competition, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. You typically win. You're like at the state level, right? I mean, you're like the best in your class in the state. And nationally, you're probably in the top 10 for your weight class, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah, probably. I don't know. It's really hard to say because not everybody is. You could be ranked number one, and then with somebody who is a big time arm wrestler, but they just don't go to a lot of competitions, and then they're actually a lot better. So you just don't really know. It can be a little bit challenging. But there's a lot of like there's a new rating system that's coming out and things, so you kind of get where you're at, and you kind of know, okay, if this guy beat this guy, kind of where you're going to be. It can be challenging, but it really is a lot of fun because, like you said, there's a lot of technique that goes into it, but a lot of strength and I love strength training, and it gives me a big focus of what I'm trying to work on, what I'm trying to do when I'm doing my training.
So Tyler, I'm so excited that you accepted my offer of joining me on my research team and leading the team to address what I believe is one of the three primary toxins that destroy mitochondrial function generally. And that would be seed or vegetable oils would be the primary one. And then the second one, which I used to believe was estrogen, but it's definitely related to estrogen, but I think is more commonly recognized is something that's called EDC, which also interestingly begins with an E. And that stands for endocrine-disrupting chemicals. Generally thought to be primarily plastics, but there's other chemicals that fall into this category. And one of the primary ways is that they impact your biology is very similar to the way seed oils do, in that they increase this release of calcium from outside the cell inside the cell, which causes a secondary release of superoxide and nitric oxide, which forms this really damaging free reactive nitrogen species called peroxynitrite. And so the EDCs do that, as estrogen does, as does linoleic acid. And there's another E, which is EMFs. And all these three work together to cause mitochondrial dysfunction and cause your body not to effectively remove oxygen from your colon, which causes the loss of your good bacteria to shift to a pathogenic disease-causing bacteria, which causes a more virulent endotoxin that causes you to die prematurely. So the fourth E is endotoxin. But essentially, what I wanted to focus on now, and I really have kind of not even arm wrestled, but I cornered off. We never want to wrestle. You never want to wrestle Tyler, unless you're a pro, that's for sure. But Tyler did agree to participate with me in this process in progress to address this plastic pollution problem. Now, let me just highlight that because many of you have heard of this. We each consume about a credit card worth of plastic every week. It's about 15 grams. That's a lot of plastic. As microplastics, it's embedded in our food. We didn't start producing plastic until the 50s, that we created about 1 million pounds a year in 1950. I was born in 1954, so it was pretty low. But now, how many, do you know how much plastic we're producing every year? Take a guess, Tyler. Wow. I know the answer is a lot, right? And you'd be right.
Yeah, it's got to be millions at this point.
Yeah, it's 400 million tons. 400 million tons. That's 2023 stats, which is the latest year for available. And the projections are in 2060, a mere 35 years from now, 2060, 1.2 billion tons of plastic every year. So it's only worsening. It's going to be up 300% the next 30 years. So it's not pretty, because it's not just destroying humans. It's destroying pretty much all biology on the planet. It's not particularly focusing on humans. It affects all of life. So I'm just so excited Tyler's decided to take the challenge. Literally, it's a personal, professional challenge that Tyler feels maybe not as passionate about it as I am, but pretty passionate enough to accept the challenge and provide his expertise in helping us navigate this challenge. I mean, this
Mm-hmm.
in front of us that really needs to be done. And he doesn't have any specific expertise. He's an expert at chemistry, but not specific in plastic chemistry, but he knows chemistry and he knows science, and he can know, and he's smart, so he can help us figure this out. It's just so, and we're not the first people doing this. There's others out there. So we're going to explore the people who've already done this work and go from there. So Tyler, why don't you take it from here and give us your perspective on this really important and potentially an existential threat if we don't address this at some point. Far more existential than global warming, no question.
I believe it's a major threat and a major problem, and it's something that does concern me. And I'm very happy that that you want to help solve this, and I do also. And I certainly don't have the expertise or the knowledge to solve this, but that's not what it's about. It's the fact that I do care about it, and I think all we have to do is find the right people, because as you mentioned, there are people who are working on this solution, and we have to kind of vet them, figure out who's the best, the group, company, people, other scientists to work with, and that's something that I think I can help with to get it started, to get it going. And I hope that we can make it successful, because it is something that we as humanity needs, and as the earth needs it as well.
This is a passion project. It's not a project designed to make a lot of money. Usually the projects, the mission projects that really are required to improve humanity, they don't make a lot of money. They don't. So you have to earn income and to create the resources that you can apply into these efforts. So I hope we can create something that's at least competitive enough to compete with it, because these are really embedded infrastructures that are very hard to overcome. And there's going to be a lot of force created against anything that's competitive. It's just like it's almost like its own energy and does not want to die. Just like many politicians and government agencies, once they're created, they will not die without a fight. So it's going to be the same thing here. And even, they're not rational. They don't implement critical thinking skills to understand that this is going to be a beneficial action for all of humanity, not just for their pocketbooks. So that's what we're up against. And I'm just so excited to start this journey and really find effective, simple solutions, not only good for humans and other biology, but also for the environment. Because plastic production is not helping the planet at all.
Yeah.
And Tyler's, of course, initial passion was pursuing molecular hydrogen, and he's one of the experts in the world, and really a student of physiology and science specifically. And he also was a consultant for me in my book, and I gave him an early draft, and he gave me a lot of feedback on it and helped me refine some of the concepts. And so I'm really delighted he was able to do that. And I think maybe now is one of the times we can dive into that. My book is called Your Guide to Cellular Health, and there's actually a different version of it coming out for this professional reference guide to cellular health, which goes into more detail and about a third more printed words in there. So we tried and written at a more sophisticated level, like at high school, like 12th, 13th grade instead of 8th grade, which is really the target level of literacy that one needs to target when you're going for a massive bestseller. Otherwise, the regular bulk of book buyers will not be interested in that. So it's a challenge actually to scale down the literacy of your writing, but we seem to have overcome it, and I'm happy about it. But anyway, so Tyler, one of the concepts we discussed in cellular health is the ability to create mitochondrial energy, and Tyler does it in an exemplary fashion. This is one of the reasons why he's so spectacularly successful at what he does. And because you can create energy, you can think clearly. So it's really difficult to be good at most anything, especially in thinking critical thinking skills, if you don't have enough energy. That's why when you're feeling tired all the time, and even though you slept enough. So it's more than just sleep. Sleep, of course, is important, but you have to have energy to run your brain. It really runs on glucose. Yes, it can take other fuels like lactate and ketones even, but the real fuel it requires is glucose. And many people on low carb diets just don't do that well because they have to make glucose and then they activate their stress hormones. So one of the theories that I was really fascinated with, and most people aren't familiar with. I've done a podcast or two on it in the past. It's called reductive stress, which is simply a surplus of electrons. Tyler has done some interesting work with molecular hydrogen reductive stress, suggesting that it has a powerful adaptogenic potential. So with that premise, I'll let Tyler take it from here, because he really is a master of the science and is really particularly skilled in explaining it. So why don't you tell us a little bit from your perspective of reductive stress?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Well, I think, of course, everyone understands the idea of oxidative stress, and that is certainly bad when it's a true stress that is too much that your body can't handle that. And that's been talked about for a long time. And I think what we're going towards is not so much a focus on oxidative stress or even so much reductive stress, because that, of course, is also an issue, but a redox homeostasis. And that's because a lot of people don't really understand how problematic reductive stress itself can be. And there's even
wait, before you bounce off terms like redox, why don't you explain what redox is? Because I think a lot of people will be confused with that term.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. When we say redox, we just mean there's oxidation and reduction. So redox is you think about reduction and oxidation. And so that's where that term comes from. It's just combining oxidation and reduction together. And so you can think about it like a battery, where you have the positive side, that's the oxidation, that's receiving electrons. You have the negative terminal of a battery, that's the negative side, that's reduction. Electrons are being are leaving that place. So that completes the battery. And our cells, our body, everything, it kind of operates like a battery in that case. And it's all about the flow of electrons. And our metabolism, that's exactly how our metabolism works. To make ATP is via this flow of electrons. And if we regulate the flow of electrons correctly, then we can make energy, then which we use as ATP. That's the energy currency of our cells. So this is this redox homeostasis that we're after. And maybe just a little bit about metabolism, because we want to talk about how hydrogen it regulates our redox homeostasis and can prevent a reductive stress as well as oxidative stress. So if we think about metabolism in general, what happens when we eat food, right? Well, when we're going to take food into our bodies, we're going to digest it. It's going to go into the blood, and that's going to go into the cells. And like your carbohydrates, typically that's going to be broken down to your glucose. That's the primary first fuel. And glucose will be oxidized in the cytosol, and you produce some ATP, just about 2 ATP there, and as well as some reducing equivalents called NADH. All right, this is nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide.
That process, is that process called glycolysis in the cytoplasm?
Yeah, that's the glycolysis, right? So glycolysis can happen without oxygen, and it can happen very fast. In fact, when we're sprinting or doing a very quick movement, that's going to rely on this anaerobic pathway. Anaerobic meaning without oxygen, and it's going to make your ATP energy very quickly, and you use glycolysis to do that. There is one other pathway that's even faster than that. That's called our ATP PCR pathway, which is the resting ATP in your muscles and your body and the creatine phosphate. So you have about second half, 2 seconds of ATP that's already present in your muscles that you can use, and then you have creatine phosphate, which can give you another 6 to 8 seconds or so. And so your total ATP PCR system can be anywhere between 8 to 12 seconds or so, depending on what level of muscle fibers you have and a number of different things, right? So that's the very first. And actually, when I teach at the university, so I'll teach the exercise physiology labs. But one of the things that we'll do, and I encourage you guys can try this also. If you go out and do something really hard, like a sprint, or like on the what's that bike? I'm thinking of the Wingate, but that's what we use in the exercise physiology lab. But when you have that bike and you're just pushing yourself as hard as you can, right? And point is, try to do this as hard as you can, and you'll see that the first few seconds you can do it no problem, right? And it's usually when you hit around that 6 to 10 second mark, you just feel all of a sudden you can't do it anymore. And that's because that first 6 to 10 seconds, you just use the ATP and phosphocreatine that was already in the muscles. And then you start to have to require on you start to have to use anaerobic glycolysis in order to start making the ATP. That's why you're going to slow down. But you can still go pretty fast for the next 1 to 2 minutes or so because you're using anaerobic glycolysis. And of course, as you're trained, you can develop that energy even faster and faster. So this is interesting because there's actually still oxygen in the cells as you're doing this. It's just that the whole process of using oxygen to metabolize your food is a lot slower than the process of anaerobic glycolysis, of producing the energy, the ATP, through glycolysis. And that's why we start doing that. And in fact, this also goes to another myth where people talk about this lactate buildup, right? Where this lactate is going to cause acidosis, or it's going to make you fatigued and it makes you tired or makes you sore. All of those things are not accurate. In fact, the lactate production prolongs your ability to exercise. So lactate production allows you to continue making energy. And the reason why is because when you're doing glycolysis, you have to oxidize the glucose molecule. You're literally taking these electrons away. And as you do that, those electrons get bound to NAD+, and there's a lot of talk about NAD+ as an anti-aging molecule. You want to have a high NAD+ to NADH ratio. So NAD+ receives these electrons and gets converted to NADH. Well, as this starts to happen, you end up using all of the NAD+ equivalents, and now everything is NADH. And when that happens, you can no longer oxidize glucose, and you're shut down completely. You couldn't exercise. So what the body does is after it makes pyruvate, which is the end product of glycolysis, when you're exercising really fast, your body will take pyruvate and convert it to lactate through this enzyme lactate dehydrogenase. And when it does that, it uses NADH and converts NADH to NAD+ and converts pyruvate to lactate. So this is the process of which this is going to happen. And by using lactate production, you can continue to regenerate NAD+. And that way you can continue exercising really, really hard. And then you end up getting tired primarily because of you're building up so much inorganic phosphate, and you are producing a lot of acid through the breakdown of glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. All of these things end up causing this fatigue that you're having. Okay, but that's glycolysis. Now I mentioned we get to pyruvate, and then what's going to happen is pyruvate will enter into the mitochondria, and then it's going to be oxidized through the tricarboxylic acid cycle, or the Krebs cycle. And during this process, that it's continued being oxidized to just produce to just CO2 and water. And those electrons that are getting taken off are also being added to these energy carriers, these cofactors called NADH or FADH2. And these coenzymes, these cofactors, they're going to be oxidized in the mitochondria at the electron transport chain. All right, so you have the different complexes, and they're going to be oxidized there, and this whole process.
That's in the inner mitochondrial membrane.
Yes, this is the inner mitochondrial membrane. Each complex in the inner mitochondrial membrane. So you have complex 1, NADH dehydrogenase. It'll take electrons and it transfer them through this protein in the inner mitochondrial membrane. And as it transfers the electrons, it actually makes this proton gradient. So it takes these protons, or hydrogen ions, okay, which is different than hydrogen gas, which is what we research therapeutically. But it takes these hydrogen ions and it pumps them into the inner membrane space and makes a really strong gradient. But what's pulling those electrons is actually oxygen. The oxygen that we breathe every day is sitting at the end of this chain of these respiratory enzymes at complex 4. And the oxygen is pulling the electrons from complex 1 all the way through. And as every time it goes through the complex, except for complex 2, but complex 1 and complex 3, you are having the electrons are being pulled through, and protons, hydrogen ions, are being pushed into the proton gradient. And then finally at complex 4, those electrons unite with oxygen, and oxygen also connects with 2 other protons, and you form water, right? We call that metabolic water. So the matrix or the inside of your mitochondria is full of these water molecules produced by the metabolism of your food. And in the process, you created this proton gradient. Now, the proton gradient is important because these protons at this high concentration really want to go into the matrix. And they're going to do that by going through this enzyme called the ATP synthase enzyme. And that's complex 5, it's going to also be called. But protons will go through that nanomotor, and it turns the nanomotor in this way. And that causes ADP, or adenosine diphosphate, and inorganic phosphate to connect and become ATP, adenosine triphosphate. All right. So this is the whole process of metabolism. So now we can start to understand where some oxidative stress or free radicals and reductive stress can also occur. Now, as we talked about within the mitochondria, we have these electron carriers and these complexes that are transferring these electrons. So at complex 1, you have NADH delivers its electrons to this first complex 1. And complex 1 takes those electrons. And as it's taking those electrons, well, if you have a very good mitochondria, or if there's damage to them to that complex, or something is going on, then one of those electrons, instead of being transferred to the next step, coenzyme Q, it could actually go to oxygen, because oxygen wants those electrons, and oxygen is dissolved, is still there in the cell. And if an oxygen gets that electron, then you'll convert oxygen gas that's in the air to the superoxide radical. And this same thing can happen at complex 3. And at complex 3 especially, because in this case, you have what's called the Q cycle. And people, a lot of your followers, of course, that they know about coenzyme Q, right? Coenzyme Q10. This is the Q that we're talking about. And during this process, you have electrons donated to that Q, and the Q donates an electron to cytochrome B, and then one Q goes up to this other iron sulfur protein. And in this process, you're creating a semiquinone radical. You actually are producing these radicals of Q, which can create a lot of superoxide radicals. Okay, so the point with all of this is this normal process of your metabolism of breathing oxygen, this entire process, you'll always convert a certain percentage of oxygen to free radicals. In fact, we've evolved to do this all the time. And that's so important for our cells, because these free radicals end up being very important signaling molecules to tell our activate parts of the mitochondria. It can improve so many aspects of cellular function when they are produced at the right concentration and at the right location with the right duration. So those are the 3 things that the way that when I teach this is what I consider, right? Concentration, location, duration. And they can do those signaling effects that they're going to do. So, for example, superoxide dismutase can convert superoxide radical to hydrogen peroxide. And then hydrogen peroxide can do some signaling. In fact, there's even an aquaporin channel that allows hydrogen peroxide to do some signaling, oxidize some various proteins. And then another enzyme, catalase, or glutathione peroxidase, can convert hydrogen peroxide to oxygen and water. So this whole process is conserved and very important for our body. And this really illustrates the fact that we need free radicals, we need oxidation, we need this entire production, because it's been evolutionarily conserved, and our bodies react and respond to that. So one of the things that can create more free radicals is when you change the cadence of your mitochondria and you put more substrates in there, and you change the delivery of oxygen. So exercise. When you exercise more, you're breathing more oxygen, your cells are more metabolically active. So just stoichiometrically, you're going to start producing more free radicals. But these free radicals in turn end up being very important signaling molecules to cause the mitochondria to get stronger and to have more mitochondria. right? And it's this whole process that initiates the cascade of a whole bunch of events. And that's why taking conventional antioxidants at high doses can actually negate the benefits of exercise training. And we see this a lot in animal studies, but even clinical studies. When you start negating those free radicals or neutralizing them prematurely, you can potentially be blunting a lot of the main benefits of your mitochondria, right? So of course, we need antioxidants, but we need the right levels. We need to be in this homeostasis, okay? So this is the whole story of oxidative stress, and everything primarily occurs within the mitochondria. Now, there are other places too, like NADPH oxidase systems and, the white blood cells and that need to be controlled too. But I guess this sets a pretty good story so far for how oxidative stress can occur, free radicals can be produced, and then that leads us into discussion of the reductive stress that can occur.
So, and I like to mention that reductive stress, you're reducing something. So it's common when there's can be two simple ways to figure it out or understand what's going on. So if you think about reducing, that's decreasing. If you decrease enough, that's negative. So it's important to understand that electrons have a negative charge. You probably remember that from your high school or even grade school chemistry class. Maybe, do they teach chemistry in grade school?
Yeah, you learned about. I thought they did. Electrons are negative. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's pretty basic stuff. So if you have an excess of negative, you have a reduced charge. So that's a simple way to remember that reductive stress is a surplus, an additional amount of electrons. And thank you for that very detailed explanation of mitochondrial physiology. And that's so important because it's understanding the details to help you navigate through that process, because ultimately that's where most of your energy comes from. And it is the source of most of the oxidative stress. I think it's over 95%. I mean, these other areas that you mentioned, but the bulk of it's from your mitochondria. That's where all the damage, and there's a lot of theories of aging that really point to this source of oxidative damage and stress. And if you can modulate that and optimize that, you can improve your life longevity and decrease your premature march to death. And Tyler actually, I go deep into the ATP production in my book, Cellular Health, at least in the professional reference guides, not so much in the Your Guide, which is the simplified version. But he challenged me on what the common belief system was, on that spinning of this nanomotor at complex 5 to produce the ATP. And I just believed it was like 10,000 times a second, which is the number. Is that the number that's conventionally touted to the speed of that?
No, the number. Maybe
no, I think it's 9,000 revolutions. I remember what it was: 9,000 revolutions, 6 or 9,000. It was 100 times per second. That's what I had it down. It was 100 times per second, which is 6,000 revolutions per minute. And he said, no, it's not. And then I dug into the literature, and you were right. It's probably single digits, maybe as high as 10, but 10 would be a lot closer than 100, and maybe as low as 3 or 4. So it was hard. That's because even at 60 revolutions per second, it becomes continuous. I mean, human visual cortex can't really decipher revolutions much above 40, I think. So it's a continuous blur. It looks like a solid when it's spinning that fast, and it's hard to imagine it going. But anything's possible. But thank you for helping me understand that it was a lot slower than what I thought. And I corrected the book, of course. And then the other thing I wanted to point out is in your story is, it's important to know that oxygen is the ultimate electron acceptor. That's where electrons want to go. They want to go to oxygen, and oxygen draws them through. That was a really good analogy you said. That was the oxygens are hanging at complex 4, and they enter at complex 1, and they kind of are drawn through that chain through the electric attractiveness of the oxygen to form water. But if this is where the reductive stress becomes good. I'll let you take it up from here. But if there's a block at one of the earlier complexes where these electrons build up, then they're not going to reach complex 4, and they can't combine with oxygen directly to form water. Instead, they'll combine with other oxygen that's not a complex 4, but it's somehow in the substrate of the inner mitochondrial membrane. But you can help me understand what this is. But then they form these oxidative free radicals like superoxide and hydrogen peroxide, and that causes damage. So, well, help me understand. I'm sure by proxy, other people, as to what's going on there, because that's the issue. If it blocks up, then you've got too many electrons in the wrong place at the wrong time, causing havoc.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the pretext for reductive stress, because reductive stress is the cause of most all oxidative stress, which makes it even further confusing. So there's not many people who understand this, and Tyler's one of them.
Well, I don't really understand. There's a lot going on, when you really look at the supramolecular complexes of how all of these are integrated together. It's very amazing. So we're just working on the best model that we have to explain the observations in the literature. But yeah, if you consider it, as you point out, with oxygen being the final electron acceptor at complex 4, driving those electrons. So you can add, for example, an inhibitor like antimyosin, for example, and antimyosin is a complex 3 inhibitor, and it specifically is binding from preventing the cytochrome B to donate its electron to a quinone, oxidized form of quinone. But when this happens, then it causes this formation of semiquinone radicals, and these radicals then can easily donate electrons to whether it be oxygen or to other areas, because an electron is extremely reactive. An electron, if we think free radicals are reactive, I mean, what is a free radical? It's just an unpaired electron that doesn't have a proton to kind of pull into the center and stabilize it. It would be just a free electron. So a free radical, we already know is very reactive. And so just an electron, not only is it an unpaired electron, but it also doesn't have a proton to at all stabilize either. So it's going to want to react with whatever it can, however it can, the quickest way it can. It wants to go the path of least resistance. So if something is, blocking it, or something is slowing it down, for example, it's going to be very problematic, because the electrons are also, like you said, they're negatively charged, and so you're going to have this repulsion, right? Because negatives are going to repel each other. So if you're getting all these electrons built up or something, it's going to push the electron, not going to be able to get through these different complexes. Like at complex 3, you get one electron at a time. One electron goes from QH2 or semiquinone radical to the risque iron sulfur protein, and then to the C1, and then finally to cytochrome C. Cytochrome C takes one electron at a time. So it's literally just a one electron transfer. And this is going to be, this again, if you're getting electrons blocked up, you can create free radicals, right? Now, when these electrons start backing up, you can cause what's called reverse electron transport. So forward is going towards the oxygen as the final electron acceptor, but RET, or reverse electron transport, if you start inhibiting some of these complexes, then you'll get, say, complex 2, instead of donating its electrons to ubiquinone, it can start donating them again to the first complex, and then instead of normally where you would be oxidizing NADH to form NAD+, you would actually start reducing NAD+ to form NADH, because you've got to dump the electrons somewhere, and the voltage potential of all these cytochromes are calculated so that normally with oxygen in the end, this is going to dump the electron and put that electron onto oxygen, and it does it in a very sophisticated way so that it's not too exothermic, because think about it, you're literally burning. Like, we use that term and something that we think we were just being figurative, but it's not figurative. You're literally burning carbohydrates or fats, but with a fire, you're putting those electrons together with the oxygen so quickly, you make an explosion. It's fire, right? In the mitochondria, you slowly do it, and as you do that, then you do create heat also. That's why you have this thermic effect of food, and because metabolism, there's heat that's going into that process, and so you do lose a lot of the energy is lost as heat, but we're able to conserve quite a bit of it, an impressive amount actually, in the form of ATP. And so, like I said, because these cytochromes, these carriers are so close to each other, you can induce this reverse electron transport. So you start converting your NAD+ molecules to NADH, and now you have a reductive stress, and where you have a too high equivalence of NADH levels, and that's going to be problematic, because that's going to really impair your metabolism, because you don't make ATP by making NADH. You can only make the ATP by making NAD plus. And in fact, having higher NAD plus levels is going to help you with your entire metabolic process. Just like we talked about with our story with glycolysis. Why is it that you want to be able to produce lactate? Because the lactate production allows you to regenerate NAD plus. It oxidizes NADH, regenerates NAD plus, and then you can continue exercising. The ETC, or the electron transport chain, does the exact same thing. It oxidizes NADH to make NAD plus, regenerating NAD plus. It's just that this process in the mitochondria takes a lot longer, there's a lot more steps than what happens in glycolysis. That's why you can use glycolysis and you can do a sprint for 1 to 2 minutes, but you can't keep that pace up for 10, 20, 30, or like 2 hours like people do for a marathon, because they have to use the mitochondria, right? So this is the reductive stress. Yeah.
Well, and traditionally it's explained that it's like the mitochondrial energy production is about 18 times more efficient than in glycolysis, suggesting there's a production of 36 or 38 even ATPs, and you disputed that and thought it was like much closer to 32 or 34. But nevertheless,
we know
it's significantly.
We can calculate. Yeah, I've seen some textbooks, give like ATP production of a glucose molecule of like 40, or 38 or 40 ATP. But we can actually calculate with no losses. Just calculate, because essentially to make one ATP molecule, we need to pump 3 protons. Okay, so if you have the nanomotor, let's think about this. If you have the ATP synthase nanomotor, you're going to take the protons from the inner mitochondrial membrane, and a proton will go through and it'll turn it. 1, another one, 2, another one, 3, right? So that third one will kick that ATP off. So that's 3 ATP. But then you have to bring in an adenosine diphosphate to translocator. So you have to bring in a proton. So that's going to be 4 protons. So essentially, you need about 4 protons in order to make an ATP molecule. Now, as we just talked about, we can go through each complex and we can see how many protons are being pumped, into the inner membrane space, right? So complex 1, right? You can calculate. We get like 4. Complex 2 doesn't pump any. Complex 3 gets 4, and then complex 4 you get 4, right? So when you do all of this, depending on if so that means that with NADH you have 2 electrons, so you can get essentially 10 ATP, right? So so then you can calculate how many NADH you produced in the TCA cycle, and then you produce 2 NADHs in glycolysis, and then you multiply that by 2.5, and you're at 32 ATP. And that's assuming that you're going. We're still a lot lower than
efficient.
what people, other things, and that's still a theoretical max. And that's also assuming that you're using complex 1 and not complex 2, because in like heart tissue and other ones, you actually skip that complex. You go to complex 2 because they have this glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate dehydrogenase shuttle to get the NADH equivalent from glycolysis. So you miss a step. So that's why it's either 30 or it's 32. It's not like it's not a range. It's a finite stoichiometry between that, depending on which cell type you're talking about. And then that's just the theoretical max, assuming there's no losses with proton leakage or electron leakage and everything.
Okay, so I did not expect that we would be diving so deep into molecular biology. And there's probably maybe 1, maybe even 2% of you are still with us now, because this is not for me. I'm leaving, but let me at least drop a pearl in there for those of you who stuck around, because reductive stress is a common problem. There's no question, and almost everyone experiences some level of it, and some much more significant than others. And it's going to reduce your mitochondrial energy production big time, because Tyler just mentioned that typically from the oxidation of one glucose molecule, you theoretical max is 32. It's not 38, 36, or 40 even. It's 32, and probably less in a lot of people, especially if you've got reductive stress. So this, again, reductive stress is a surplus of electrons hanging around in your electron transport chains that can't go forward and cannot attract to oxygen and combine to form water. So if you're paying attention, then the simple, easiest, and best question to ask is, how the heck do I get rid of reductive stress? Wouldn't you think that's a good question to ask? Well, I've got two proposals, and I suggest them, and then Tyler can comment on them. In my view, and I write about in the book, there's only two that I'm aware of that are useful. One is a concept that was popularized by Clint Ober, not discovered, but popularized. And it's a concept called grounding or earthing, I think that he calls it. And he contends I believe, incorrect supposition that the grounding occurs because there is a surplus of electrons in the ground and you absorb them, and that neutralizes somehow oxidative stress. And it makes kind of sense because there's, oxidation you would need. I don't know how, but that's not the case. It just isn't the case. I mean, it's the exact opposite. And physiologically, it can go either way. The electrons from the ground can go into you, or your electrons can go into the ground. But I think for the most grounding, you're releasing these electrons back into the ground, and it's a good strategy in most of the world except for North America, from what I understand after studying EMFs quite a bit, because the electric utilities short-circuited in an effort to reduce their cost of providing electricity. They did not put a ground back to the utility company, so they allowed the ground itself to form the source of those transfer of electrons back to balance things out to the utility company. And the problem is that many people who use this electrical current have motors, and this motors creates what's called a high voltage transient, sometimes called dirty electricity. And that is not a biologically useful frequency. And when you're exposed to this current through grounding in North America, you're exposed to that. And that is speculated by many, and there's some good research to support it, that has some adverse biological consequences that are not good for you. So if you're not in North America, it's not a problem, then grounding tends to work. So I don't encourage people to ground in North America unless you're in a very, very rural environment, which in your distance and anything close to you or local is not producing these currents. There are some places that exist, but those are few and far between, and you're probably not living there. But where you can live and live easily and joyfully would be next to the ocean, because the ocean is the largest sink of it's the biggest ground on the planet. There is no superior, better grounding than the ocean, which is one of the reasons why I walk in the ocean pretty much every day, unless there's a but a lightning storm, because lightning in the ocean is not a good mix. You do not want to be a lightning rod standing in the ocean, or you may not be around here for much longer. So if there's lightning and you're in the ocean, do not walk in the ocean, because lightning goes to ground and you're the ground. That's not a good strategy. So that's one, probably the best way. That opportunity is not available to hardly anyone. So the other way is to take the first drug, the modern drug ever discovered, which is in 1874. It's an industrial dye for blue jeans. It's called methylene blue, and it is a very potent oxidizer. So it's the oxidizers that get rid of the electrons. And interestingly, methylene blue has this penchant, and in fact, so much so that of going right to the mitochondria. And it does it so effectively, it's a mitochondrial stain, because that's where it finds it. You look at it in a microscope, that's where the methylene blue is. It's staining the mitochondria. So it goes straight to there like a magnet. And it eliminates these surplus electrons and allows that mitochondrial electron transport chain to function the way it was designed, so that you can seamlessly produce the ATP. You want to take it about a half hour before you need it. And I think it's a good idea to if you're going to get sun, I think everyone pretty much benefits from the sun if they don't have this reductive stress and they don't have a lot of linoleic acid or seed oils in their tissue, because that's not a good combination either. So many of us, even though the sun is clearly one of the most powerfully effective and beneficial therapeutic interventions, for most people it causes harm. And it causes harm because you've had just a surplus of these really negative fats that accumulate in your tissues, specifically in your subcutaneous tissues under your skin, that get exposed to the UV light, and they cause very dangerous reactive aldehydes produced from these fats, and they cause serious oxidative damage, and they destroy tissues, cell membranes, proteins, DNA, mitochondria even. So you got to be really, really careful. But that's where the methylene blue and grounding comes in, and that's my take on how to reduce or significantly ameliorate reductive stress.
Yeah.
So
Well,
let me hear your comments on that one.
Well, it's interesting, and of course, I think grounding would certainly have some benefits. I'm not, I think I'm not sold on the mechanism again with electron transfer, just because we talked about electrons are so reactive, right? That's the whole issue with them within the mitochondria. So to think that we're going to be able to have this simple transfer of electrons going from the ground and into our tissues and then into our blood and then right to the mitochondria,
that's what
or the other way
Oberst thinks it
around.
is. I don't think it's that way. I think it's the other way.
Yeah, or the
But
other
both
way
ways
around,
are
right?
Yeah.
So that means you can have the electron go from the inner mitochondrial space, go through the cytosol, through the cell membrane, travel through the bloodstream, travel to the external surface of the skin, and go into the ground without reacting with anything else. Despite the fact that it's more reactive than the hydroxyl radical, is a little bit difficult for me to believe.
The electron is more reactive than electron is more reactive than hydroxyl free radical.
Absolutely, yeah, because you have the electrons with a 2.3 volt electro potential. There's no proton to stabilize it. It just
Well, how about developing some type of electrochemical balance that shifts, that essentially, sometimes maybe even quantumly shifts the charge throughout the body and sort of neutralizes it in a way that it doesn't require the physical transport of the electron, but more or less the charge gets mediated.
Yeah, quantum tunneling type aspect.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but typically with these nuclear quantum events that occur, they occur, and you can do it with protons and electrons. This absolutely is how they are explained. But to explain this in such a macro scale wouldn't work, or otherwise we wouldn't be able to explain how a wire like a copper wire transfers electricity, because we're like, well, these quantum effects and things. So there's going to be benefits for grounding, and the grounding could potentially even help with the whole reductive stress and oxidative stress. But I would say probably more to do with something to do with oxygen respiration, with improving the metabolism, other things, and not so much with electron flow, just because the electrons are so reactive. I mean, you just talked about sun damage. Why is that damaging? Because those UV rays, they come and they hit the skin, and they go into the cytosol where you have bulk water, and they cause this UV damage will actually it's called radiolysis. Basically, it's separating the water molecules and creating free radicals, free electrons in the bulk water, and then you have atomic hydrogen, hydroxyl radicals, and a whole bunch of other types of free radicals that happen from radiation. And then those free electrons then go and create other free radicals and react with your tissues and cause all the damage.
I would speculate that's higher energy radiation, more like gamma rays rather than UV rays.
Sure. Yeah. It's a higher
most
radiation.
Of the higher radiation densities, right? Or volt or energies, not densities, energies. Because we know very clearly that there's almost no damage from the sun in those who have very low linoleic acid levels. So it's the UV hitting and oxidizing those fatty acids. The multiple linoleic acid have 2 double bonds, but if you had like DHA or EPA, 3 or 4 double bonds.
And think about the
those
mechanism.
oxidants, those reactive aldehydes, is what kicks off the damage. They're very reactive molecules.
Kicks off the electrons, right? Because you have these aldehydes, you have conjugated pi systems that have electrons that are easily pushed off with a little bit of photonic energy. Those photons come, they deliver the energy. The electrons are kicked off. Those electrons in turn create free radicals, and that causes a whole bunch of damage. So that's why. That's my thing with the grounding mechanism. It's almost contradicted by the damaging effects of too many.
Yeah, well, we see it. We'll observe. You're correct. Yeah, but that doesn't mean it's not the case. It just means we don't understand if it works that way.
The benefits. Yeah, because there are some studies. They're not great.
That's my speculation, but no one knows at this point for sure. I'm hoping I'll contribute to the science that identifies it at some point in the future, because it's an interesting puzzle, and I love puzzles.
Yeah, you love puzzles too. I do, and that's why I'm happy to contribute, because I would be very fascinated to understand that mechanism more. So the methylene blue, I also like your idea, but of course the problem is we're taking, if we don't have reductive stress, because the methylene blue is acting as the final electron acceptor in that case, is getting rid of these excess
instead of
electrons
oxygen.
instead of oxygen. Well, we only, it's not really totally like that, but that's okay. The point is, what if you don't need that because you don't have reductive stress? Or what if ideally you have a good functioning metabolism and diet and everything else, but that's not so the methylene blue would be like a band-aid situation, right?
It is not a solution. It's just a crutch. It's a bandage. Yeah. You're absolutely correct. It is not the magic bullet that Paul Ehrlich in the 1890s believed it to be by curing malaria.
Right. So one other thought that could potentially be beneficial could actually be hydrogen gas, molecular hydrogen. And there's an interesting paper.
Oh, it's always about hydrogen. It's always about hydrogen with Tyler. Help us understand how it's always about how it's about hydrogen could do this.
How does the saying go? When you only have a hammer, everything's a nail.
Right. Absolutely. Yes.
So it is interesting, though. There is some interesting research with molecular hydrogen, which it is the smallest molecule, so it can easily diffuse into the subcellular compartments like the mitochondria. And we can actually see that it can suppress superoxide production, and it can, and in some cases, in other cases, it can increase superoxide production. So already we're starting to see this adaptogenic redox modulation. It's not just doing one thing or the other, but it's doing whatever our cells need. And specifically, in one very interesting study, they took and they fed it was a cell culture, and they gave an excess amount of various substrate like succinate or NADH levels to see what would happen. And in these cases where you were suffering from a reductive stress and a reverse electron transport, hydrogen was able to fix that, get it to go the other way. Is able to help regenerate NAD+, not have the reductive stress, and get things back to the forward electron transport. Now, at the same time, there is some benefits to reverse electron transport. There are some benefits to like fasting and some other things, because when you do that, and it's a hormesis principle, right? Just like exercise, you want to do it for a short period of time. It's these intermittent type of exposures and so on. This increase in superoxide production and it can end up leading to rejuvenation of the mitochondria and activation of PGC1 alpha, UPRMT, the unfolded protein response of the mitochondria. There's so many benefits. Hydrogen, when everything's normal, but you need a little bit of additional hormetic stress, hydrogen alone can initially mildly induce reverse electron transport, increase superoxide production, followed by the reversal of that, but yet you're left with the changes in gene expression, such as PGC1 alpha, activation of NRF2, and all those other genes that lead to improved mitochondrial biogenesis and mitochondrial function. And now your mitochondria is working the correct way. So that's I think molecular hydrogen really is an interesting solution. This is not, a strong drug
for reductive stress. For reductive stress.
Yeah,
and thank you for explaining that.
Both reductive and oxidative stress.
Yeah, which means it's adaptogenic. It modulates whatever's dysfunctional, and it makes it better, with virtually no side effects, none, zero that we know of. It's like the ultimate supplement.
Well, it's almost really like the side effects are potentially what mediate beneficial effects, right? Because a side effect is that it can, in some conditions, induce reverse electron transport or increase superoxide production. But it's only transient. And those transient increases end up activating our heat shock proteins and a lot of other benefits, NRF2 that I mentioned, and so on. So it's almost like, yes, there are toxic effects, but they're so mild and transient that those toxic effects end up being partly how the beneficial effects are mediated, the principle of hormesis.
Okay, so I thank you for changing my mind yet again, unexpectedly, about the way to remediate reductive stress. Ideally, I think you should do grounding for other reasons, but be really careful about doing it in North America. I think it does. There's no reason to suggest it doesn't. We don't just know the mechanism. No one does. but you can speculate on it. But nevertheless, I think it works, and there's virtually no charge for it except for to get your butt to the beach, and we'll put your feet in the ocean. But that's going to be impractical. And I thought methylene blue was the workaround, but the reality is, and it can be. I mean, methylene blue is a very potent lifesaver, and it can improve mitochondrial function dramatically, especially when you're exposed to mitochondrial poison like cyanide or carbon monoxide. It can save your life. I mean, there's not many things that can reverse it because carbon monoxide binding to hemoglobin is really potent. But if you interject methylene blue, you can save someone's life for sure. For sure, it saves many people's lives. It's almost in every drug in every emergency room in the world almost. But it's a drug, and it's, we don't want to use drugs, but hydrogen. I mean, you can make an argument that almost everyone would benefit. Now, some people may not need it. In fact, if you're really healthy, you don't. And I want to talk how often you use it, but essentially, there's no side effects, none, and the high likelihood, probably over 99%, is it's going to help you in some way, even if you take it in excess. Well, no, if you take it in excess, it may not work because one of the mechanisms you need to pulse the dose. So if you're taking hydrogen gas continuously for 24 hours, no bueno, it's not going to work that well at all because you need to pulse it.
If you could possibly do that, right? If you could convert your entire house to only hydrogen gas, 24/7 exposure, then it's possible.
But it would be percentage. It's not pure hydrogen, otherwise you'd be dead.
Yeah, exactly. But like 2 or 4% hydrogen gas all the time.
Right. That's not a good idea.
Yeah, maybe not. Yeah. I mean, but the thing is, there was only one study that shows that Parkinson's disease study that 24/7 continuous exposure to hydrogen gas did not give therapeutic benefits. But that was in that specific study, and it's possible. I'm just saying we don't actually know. It's possible that there are a lot of benefits if you could potentially be exposed 24/7 all the time. And in cell culture studies, we will expose the cells for longer than 24 hours, 72 hours, and we can see benefits. So they didn't go away. And so to your point though, is that there doesn't seem to be any downside effects of hydrogen gas. And so if I were to try the methylene blue or other types of oxidative therapies, I would certainly want to try hydrogen gas because at the same time, because it does act as this rectifier, as a modulator, as this adaptogenic molecule, so that it helps to keep things in check. Because methylene blue, maybe it's going to push things in some areas too far one way.
Right. Sure.
But maybe in other areas it's going to help you. Hydrogen gas might be able to help mitigate the excessive amounts and get things closer to homeostasis. Because hydrogen gas is not near as powerful as a modulator as, say, methylene blue or some of these other therapies. That's why there's very little to no known downsides of molecular hydrogen. So combining with the other therapies could be a good way to go. And so that's, we have a lot more to study and learn about the benefits of molecular hydrogen, which actually we should probably make that announcement about what we have in store.
Well, yeah, but let me just finish this question before making an announcement. So I'd like you to speculate on this. So you're one of the healthiest humans I know, but you also abuse yourself regularly. And I believe unnecessarily, but you're allowed to because you can do it. And you're at the time of your life where you're never going to have this level of fitness ever. So you regularly exercise, I believe over-exercise, and create a lot of damage. So I'm assuming you take molecular hydrogen regularly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it every day or nearly every day?
Yeah, I usually take it every day, but the only reason sometimes I do not is because I forget about it and I just get busy. And so I don't do it. Otherwise, I would try to take it every day because I just don't see any downsides. And typically what happens is I'll be writing a paper or working on our results that we're analyzing, and it's really impressive.
You're getting re-inspired.
Oh, yeah, I need to go get some of that. I want to try that. What if it really doesn't work this good?
Yeah, for sure. But assuming you were optimally healthy like you are, and you weren't exposing yourself to this trauma of exercise that you do regularly, do you think that there would still be a need for it or benefit? Would there be benefit be relatively mitigated because of you're not damaging yourself as much?
Well, in my opinion, Yeah, I think there would still be a potential benefit because it's impossible to live in such an environment or in such a way that you're not going to be inadvertently exposed to whatever happens, because you have two main things that you just are just inevitable in this world.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, aging. We're all getting
Mm-hmm.
older, and as you get older, you just have more senescence. You have these pathological cells that just produce a little more free radicals than they normally would otherwise, and more inflammation than would otherwise. Taking hydrogen gas helps to reduce and modulate that, and helps to activate things like autophagy, helps and as well as helps to prevent excessive autophagy. So it modulates this entire process that happens as we age. So I think we're all susceptible to aging, unfortunately, and hydrogen is going to help with that. And then the other issue living in this world is we are always exposed to some sorts of toxins, whether it's the plastics that we get our foods in, we go outside and it's just smoky. We have wildfires around here. We have pollution from the cars. We have whatever it is. And we have seen a lot of studies showing that we administer hydrogen gas simultaneously or before the administration of some of these environmental pollutants and toxins, that hydrogen gas prevents or helps to mitigate against some of these toxic effects. And so I'm thinking, okay, so why not take my molecular hydrogen in the day? I don't know what I'm going to be exposed to throughout the day, and I don't know what might be going on inside of my body that could be out of array, out of in disorder. So I take molecular hydrogen,
Okay.
and so I do think that there are some benefits, even if you could be perfect.
Okay,
and I
good.
think that's potentially why, if you look at the correlation, healthy people have a healthy microbiome, and a healthy microbiome produces a lot of hydrogen gas when they're given the right nutrients.
Yeah, good point. All right, so we'll pivot back to the resource that you're making available shortly after this call, actually sometime in early September, I believe. So why don't you enlighten us as to what this is?
Yeah, I want to let everybody know we're doing a monumental conference. This is a virtual molecular hydrogen conference that is put on by MHI, Molecular Hydrogen Institute, which is, as many of you know, a science-based nonprofit. A lot of times conferences are, you pay a ton of money and then you're just sold a bunch of products or something. There's nothing about this. This is an academic conference. This is not, a lot of these speakers, they're not people you're going to find on TikTok and YouTube and Instagram, because they're in the lab doing research. These are academic researchers. Dr. John Kerr from Harvard University is one of the co-hosts, co-chairs with me. We have top speakers from Japan, China, and Europe that are going to be presenting their research. In fact, this is a 2-in-1 event. It's an academic symposia for academics. It's people who want to get into the hydrogen research, want to learn about this, are medical doctors or so on, but aren't going to fly to China or Japan or Europe or something to go to a conference. As well as, this is open to the general public. In fact, we have a number of professors who have changed their PowerPoints and presentation specifically to give a talk about their research and about molecular hydrogen, what it is, what the benefits are, and so on, so that the general public, the layman, can understand it. And you can get all this information if you just go to the Molecular Hydrogen Institute. You'll see a place there to sign up. The website is h2mhisummit.org. Or make it simple, if you just find me on social media, on like Instagram, Tyler W. LeBaron, and you just click on the link in my bio, and it has all the links right there. But I highly encourage you to please support our mission and spread this link, this information, to everybody that you know. There is a free ticket and a VIP ticket. The VIP ticket's only $27. You get access to everything for several months.
I don't know. I think that's too much. That's too much.
Yes, and if you think it's too much, then there's a free ticket as well. So there's like literally no excuse for people to learn from credentialed professors that are really doing the research on this area in these things. This is, I am just so thrilled and happy for the support, these relationships that I've gathered for the past 10 plus years with these professors, and now they're giving their support back to help educate the general public, to help support me and my mission. We have over 30 speakers, I think close to 40 speakers who are putting their presentations together, research labs all over the world that are doing this. And so I'm just really excited to make this announcement and for you guys to check it out. And this will really help our mission. So thank you.
Well, congratulations. I think it's going to be wonderful. I look forward to viewing that at some point. Well, it's been a great time, Tyler. And, I'm sure many of you have heard the thunderstorm that we're recording this through. And, lightning is one of the ways that electrons get transferred back to the Earth, and which is why it's such a big grounding device, because of lightning.
This guy is suffering from reductive stress.
This guy is suffering from reductive. Just got to get rid of it. And that's exactly what happens. And I'm sure you can enlighten us on that, but I forget exactly the particles that are aligning up there and bumping against each other. It creates this massive electrical potential up there that has to discharge itself to the ground. Help us understand that.
Well, I'm not a physicist, but yeah, that's what's going on, right? Just like static electricity, right? You have the buildup of electrons on different molecules or what have you, and actually lightning, it's going to go down and up. It's going both ways, right? That transfer of charges. It's just whatever there is a differential of charge, and that's where the lightning direction is going to go.
So thank you for enduring that. I just thankfully we didn't lose power, and we're still going to continue it. But anyway, I hope you'll consider seriously attending the outrageously expensive event that Tyler put together with these 30 to 40 expert speakers, and surely going to provide some amazing information. So I would encourage you to consider attending that. And obviously the outrageously expensive was a sarcasm, because it's almost free. It is free, in fact. And if you want to be generous and donate $25, you can certainly do that. So Tyler, why don't you repeat again where the people can contact you and learn more about your work, and really specifically more about molecular hydrogen, which really is, and I appreciate connecting with you, because every time I do, I'm reminded of just how good molecular hydrogen is. And actually, I'm pretty confident. I think we're the biggest sellers of molecular hydrogen in the U.S. Probably. Certainly on Amazon. No one comes close to us. And the reason we are is because I believe in it. I really think it's a powerful therapy and approach, and really particularly effective for what we talked about with reductive stress. And I'm so grateful for our conversation, because you help remind me, and especially because as we're recording this, I still haven't had the final draft of my book. So I'm going to actually include that in there, thanks to your reminding me, as you get reminded of the experiments and literature that you review, that this is a powerful strategy. And and almost everyone's going to benefit from it. It's the rare person who will be mildly beneficial, but almost everyone will benefit. It's not going to cause any harm. It's just, there's very few supplements that don't cause any harm. This is one of them. So it's just kind of like a no-brainer. Not the easiest way to take a supplement. There are some challenges. Maybe before we close out, you can just remind us the different ways that people can administer hydrogen gas. The simple way is to generate it through a tablet. A specific type of tablet that can generate bubbles, these nanobubbles that can create really high concentrations of molecular hydrogen, because you want a high concentration, and take it quickly, as opposed to small concentrations continuously. So the tablets seem to be the best way, but there are things like gases and inhalers and other devices. So why don't you run us through the range and give us your brief summary of what you think the best strategies are?
Yeah, I mean, inhalation is very common. It's done a lot throughout Asia and other places. It's just some of the concerns with that is, of course, hydrogen gas is explosive. So if you're not careful, there could be a potential issue. But it can be done safely, and you want to make sure that.
But that's over. What's it, over 7%? Or what percentage?
Typically we say 4.3%, but you might be able to go up as high as 10% before it's like an actual explosion. And there's like different classes, like as a detonation or as a flammable or as classified. So there's some nuance with that. But yeah, inhalation is very is a good way. But actually, most research and most studies are still done with just drinking hydrogen water, which is just water with hydrogen gas dissolved into the water. And there's lots of ways to make that. But of course, as you mentioned, the tablets is a convenient way for a lot of people. And just because you drop the tablet in there and it does produce a high dose of hydrogen, that's going to provide you with clinically relevant doses similar to what we use in the clinical studies. And this can be measured with gas chromatography. And we just drop the tablet in there, and then people can wait for the tablet to dissolve. But still drink when the water is cloudy. That way you get the most hydrogen gas. And yeah, I think people can just get it, as you said, just on Amazon, other places. And then of course there's other ways to get hydrogen water. But I know that's a convenient and easy way, and we've actually used that method in some of our clinical studies as well. And if those who want to know more about this, again, please attend our conference, attend our academic public
experts in the world
on molecular hydrogen, right? Because it's unlike anything else, because there's no corporate sponsors. I mean, Dr. Mercola is not supporting the show, our conference or something with Mercola banner, get our tablets or something like. And we've been offered by companies. We don't want to have any corporate sponsor. We just want to be completely educational and appeal to the academic and spread this awareness of what's going on. And so yeah, we encourage you to please check it out and to get that VIP ticket so that you can see all the presentations. Some really cool presentations that we're really excited about.
Yeah, it'd be really good. And I just want to remind you too, if you remember, as Tyler said earlier, hydrogen is the smallest molecule in the universe that we know of. Maybe in a parallel universe it isn't, but in our current universe it's the smallest. And
it has to be the smallest.
As a result of that, it doesn't hold well in containers like plastic, which you shouldn't be using anyway. But if you put it in a plastic bottle, it's going to diffuse out really quickly. It's it's almost like a fly going through a fence. It's not going to stop, and it goes right through. So you could put it in a metal container; it would last a lot longer, of course. But the thing is if you're going to make hydrogen water gas, you're going to want to drink it quickly. It's not the easiest supplement to take. It's kind of like a pain, and you have to sweet time it. And some people put the tablet in the water, and then they forget about it, and they come back 5 minutes later, and it's all gone. So you almost have to set a timer to remind yourself, because 90 seconds is a long time, and people easily get distracted, and you come back later, and it's gone. So you don't want to waste it. Just put a timer on it, you're okay. Unless you're really assiduous and you can sit there and look at those bubbles for 90 seconds with no stop. But that isn't most people. All right. Well, thank you, Tyler.
Well, even if you come back, we've measured, even if you come back after 5 minutes, there's still a substantial amount of molecular hydrogen.
You're not going to get as much benefit as drinking right after.
Okay, well, thank you again, Dr. Mercola. It's a pleasure. And yes, for those who want to attend this summit, you can check out the link in my bio at Tyler W. LeBaron is my Instagram handle, or just molecularhydrogeninstitute.org, and you can see all the information. And so we welcome everyone there.
Yeah, look forward to it. Thanks for joining us, Tyler. Appreciate all you're doing.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much for watching. Remember, hit the like and subscribe button so you can get more videos that can help you and your family take control of your health.